All right, everybody. It is I, Van Allen Plexico, and we are back with all of the Avengers. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about Avengers Volume 1, issues 21 and 22, otherwise known as the Power Man saga, the Eric Josten Power Man, not the Luke Cage Power Man. This would be the Power Man that the Eric Josten that later shows up as Atlas in Thunderbolts, among other identities and other appearances over the years. I skipped about uh, 30 years of continuity there from this appearance all the way to Thunderbolts, but you get the idea. Um, and that's, I think, going to be interesting. We're going to kind of explore these two issues back to back here together, just you and me. And before we get started, I have to, of course, as always, thank the people that make this show possible. They are our founders. We are all founders in the Avengers Assemble Patreon now. They include MVP, and she is an MVP, captivating Kathy Bright. No one fights like Gaston, Earl Ricks, David Wright, and Emmanuel Seaman. If you would like to join their ranks and help make this show possible, and I said last time I'm going to keep doing it as long as we have even one patron. It just makes it more difficult to keep it going, but we will do it. Just go to www.avengersassemble.net, avengersassemble.net, the famous Avengers Assemble website, and there's a big box there that you can click on to become a patron and help support the show. Every little bit helps to keep the show going. Because we also rebroadcast the audio portion of this show now on the White Rocket podcast. Which is at whiterocket.podbean, Podbean, podbean.com. In fact, before we get going, for those of you that only see the video and don't see the don't listen to the audio version, let me just share over that screen that I usually share for the comic book and show you. Here is the podcast page. The White Rocket Entertainment Network is at whiterocket.podbean.com. And you can see we cover all kinds of stuff there on that podcast. And there's where all the Avengers are currently posting. We're only up to issue 6 and 7, the one that I did with Luke Smith that was I thought was pretty entertaining. It was entertaining to me. Seemed like Luke was having a good time too. So they're up to issue 6 and 7 on the audio. But those of us here are at issue 21. So we are, this is the cover dated October 21st, 1965 issue of Avengers, issue 21. Introducing Power Man. Who is he? The cover asks. And then we have the title there in a kind of a banner box in quotation marks, The Bitter Taste of Defeat. And I will tell you, I think that is a better representation of what this issue and these two issues and this story are all about than Power Man. I think that Power Man is a character, basically a copy of Wonder Man, right? I mean, he has very little personality. The only thing we can say about him, other than he's as strong as Wonder Man, from back in issue, I think it was number 9, right? The only thing we can really say about him is that he doesn't mind being a villain. I mean, that's the two traits Wonder Man had to have in this story are that he's powerful enough to fight the Avengers by himself. Okay, check. And he doesn't mind being a villain. Whereas Simon Williams, Wonder Man, ultimately decided that he didn't want to be a villain, even though the Masters of Evil was who he got his powers from. I'm thinking, if you're getting your powers from people called the Masters of Evil, you might suspect foul play is going to be involved at some point, right? But good old Simon, he's just trusting, I guess, innocent, whatever. I don't even remember exactly how it went. But yeah, Power Man is in this story basically to serve the purpose of being somebody that could physically challenge the Avengers and kind of, as you see on the cover there, who could actually defeat them. And Stan doesn't mince any words as we go ahead. Oh, by the way, I do have to point out, we are still in that brief and weird period where they put Marvel Pop Art Productions on the cover. This scan that I have here kind of loses about a eighth of an inch down the left margin, so it looks like Marvel Op Art Productions Producing Power Man. Kind of lose the edge there, but and by the way, man, how big the Comics Code Authority thing used to be. I don't think it was that big when I started reading comics in the 70s. This is still 65. So it's bigger than most of the other. I mean, that's a really big box that says approved by the Comics Code Authority. And I guess they must have had a bunch of those photostated or something. Surely they didn't have to redraw that for every single comic. Surely not. Surely they pasted it on there, right? I got to think they pasted it on there. Okay. So introducing Power Man, who is he? And the answer is nobody, really. Who cares? He's Eric Josten. He's a dude that the Enchantress is going to make really powerful. So, by the way, another thought that occurs to me is that Quicksilver is still wearing his green outfit here. And as much as he's identified with that green outfit, and I've always felt like they put him in green just to kind of contrast with Wanda I started to say Wanda in red or scarlet, but they tend to show Wanda's costume in all different colors. They don't, I guess they're trying to say it's in the shadows or different lighting or something, but they ever change Captain America's costume. He's never in green, right? I mean, they don't show Captain America in green. Why do they show Wanda in like pink and orange and all these weird colors brown, right? We've seen her in some really weird colors over these issues. So anyway, we're now on our 6th issue since the big change, right? 16 was the big change of the lineup, and now 5 more issues after that. But yeah, you see the Avengers, the new Avengers, quote unquote, Cap's Kooky Quartet. Clearly, they have been defeated. Hawkeye is in the process of collapsing right here, even though Power Man is looking at us rather than he's got his back turned to them. So, all right, well, enough of that. Let's get on into it. So, the bitter taste of defeat. I mean, it's right there in the title, and it's right there in the big explosive blurb from Stan, which is, so he's saying, in the first few months of their formation, the new team of Avengers proved to be more than equal to the tasks that befell them. But now they are about to experience their first disaster. What effect will defeat have upon those who have never known aught but victory? I love Stan throwing in an aught there. Who've never known aught but victory. The story begins with Hawkeye changing a fuse, which is interesting in that it's not a very exciting splash page other than, look at all this cool machinery. This, I've got to give Don Heck credit and Wally Wood, because I always thought that the super complicated machinery in Avengers Mansion was a George Perez creation, and he did it well, right? I mean, George could draw parts of Avengers Mansion looking like, the living room of a billionaire, and he would draw other parts of Avengers Mansion looking like the inside of the International Space Station, or more complicated than that, the inside of Galactus's ship. And he did that. But that wasn't George. I mean, look at that. That is, for those of you listening, there's a really super complex bunch of machinery all over the walls. And again, I don't know, this is Don Heck. Stan, they do a weird thing in this one. They have, instead of like a credit box, it says written with the usual Stan Lee madness, drawn with the usual Don Heck magnificence, inked with the usual Wally Wood magic, lettered with the usual Artie Simek mistakes. Haha, they always make fun of Artie Simek. And then, of course, the colorist is completely ignored. I've mentioned that several times now, I know. I don't really personally know any professional colorists, so I'm not standing up for friends or anything, but I did see, I've been one of our patrons, David Wright, and I have been reading Claw the Unconquered, the David Michelinie, Ernie Chua mid 70s DC comic about like a barbarian character, kind of Conan like. And it's really fun. There's only 12 issues. It's really fun. And in it, David Michelinie actually mentions the fact that DC policy did not allow them to mention the colorist because it made the splash page too cluttered. So acknowledging one of the people whose work touched every panel of every page could not be allowed because having one more name in the credits made the splash page too cluttered. That was company policy at DC and apparently also at Marvel. You'll notice it never stands in the way of like the writer or the artist or anything, but oh well. So Hawkeye is trying to change a fuse. Captain America shows up, and really at this point in their relationship, Hawkeye could be eating pancakes and Cap would say, "Oh, Hawkeye, you're eating pancakes." And Hawkeye would say, "What's it to you, flag pants? Somebody as old as you doesn't even, I'm surprised they had even invented pancakes when you were born." You know, I mean, Hawkeye is such, I try to make the language on this show PG at worst, right? But I have names that I would like to use to describe Hawkeye. I really do have some. He just takes the cake sometimes. He just does. Hawkeye's been in this comic now. This is the 6th issue, and I am officially over Hawkeye. And I know we've talked with some of the guests that have been on here before that people just love Hawkeye. Okay. I imagine in his own solo stories, I haven't really ever read many Hawkeye solo stories. I imagine he's fun. I like the Disney Plus show. I thought it was really, really good. I enjoyed it because that's a very different Hawkeye, right? That's Ultimate Hawkeye, who's a very different character from this. But this Hawkeye from 1965 in the Avengers, is just a huge pain in the butt. I have no patience for him left at all. And in fact, I'm the point of rooting for the villain every time he fights somebody. I'm like, oh, maybe they'll be the one to take him out and relieve us of our Hawkeye problem. All right. So, though I have to admit, Cap does throw his weight around. Cap's like, you know the rules, Avenger. That equipment is almost priceless. Nobody is to tamper with it except Tony. I guess Tony gets to tamper with it. Knock it off, Rogers. Anybody can replace a crummy fuse, blah, 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 blah. If not for Tony Stark, you'd probably be living in a tent, says Cap. That'd suit me just fine, says Hawkeye. At least there wouldn't be room for you to go snooping around, he says to Cap. And Cap says, you're starting to really bug me, mister, so I'm warning you. And Hawkeye says, you're warning me? Question mark. Exclamation point, exclamation point. You overrated has-been. I've been itching for a chance to change the parting in your hair. That parting in your hair. Okay, Hawkeye, I guess it's time I taught you that your junior Robin Hood kit doesn't give you the right to throw your weight around. And they're about to go down. And I just have to say, this might have been the first, well, I guess Hulk, right? Hulk fighting them is the first time the Avengers fought each other. But if we don't count Hulk, since he left, he technically wasn't even a member when they tracked him down and fought him or whatever. This could be like the first time two allegedly rational, non-monstrous Avengers threw down on each other in the mansion. And of course, later on, we know that the Vision and Wonder Man are going to do that twice. Once in 158, and then again in the Kurt Busiek, George Perez run in the volume 3, I guess we call it. But this would have been like really technically the first throwdown of current Avengers inside Avengers Mansion. Unfortunately, Quicksilver steps in and stops them, and then Wanda kind of tells them off. And Hawkeye calls Captain America Methuselah. I always like to point out, and I think one of our guests recently pointed this out too, that the amount of time Captain America was gone, he's not exactly Buck Rogers here. You know, he was frozen in 44, 45, and this is 65. He was in the ice 20 years at this point. In fact, 18 years, because he's already been out for 2 years. So 18 years, and he's Methuselah. Hawkeye, what the heck? Come on. So they bicker about it. And then Quicksilver takes issue with how Cap talks to Wanda. And so they're still griping at each other. And meanwhile, one of Baron Zemo's surviving war soldiers in the jungles of South America finds his way into the lair of Zemo, where they created Wonder Man. And we get a flashback to Wonder Man. And then the Enchantress sees that guy and says, this is the chance I've been waiting for. Because there's one thing we know about Asgardians in the early Marvel comics, is they could like see things happening on Earth and then take, I guess, the Rainbow Bridge or some kind of a spell. So this must be Eric Josten. So now we know that Eric Josten actually began his career as one of Baron Zemo's soldiers. I joined Zemo years ago because I was wanted in Europe for smuggling. Interpol will still be looking for me. If I leave the jungle, I wouldn't last a week. So the Enchantress shows up and basically offers to operate the machine on Eric Josten and zaps him. She gives him a costume, which he kind of rejects. She gives him the name Power Man. So everything Power Man, basically, in this incarnation comes from the Enchantress. The powers, the costume, the name, it all comes from the Enchantress. And off they go because they hate the Avengers. And she has a plan. And I do like this, right? If the point of this story is that the Avengers lose, you know, Stan could have taken the lazier route and just have the Avengers get beaten up. But he doesn't. Give him credit, right? Instead, Stan and Don Heck come up with this whole plan by the Enchantress that she's going to like make it look like the Avengers are causing chaos and destruction in New York City. She puts their reputation, she gives them such a bad reputation through her clever machinations that the Avengers are going to get basically run off and shut down. So this monster appears and they go and they're fighting it. Not really able to do a whole lot against it. There's no police. Hawkeye doesn't want to listen to Cap and take stock of the situation. He has to jump right into things like a young person would do, for sure. And so they continue to fight. Here come the cops. And the monster vanishes so that all the damage from the battle with the monster looks like it came from the Avengers just going out and blowing stuff up. Okay. So Cap says, you don't think we just did this on a whim, do you? And the police officer says, look, Avenger, the first we heard of a 30-foot high what's this is from you. How come nobody else in the area saw it? So that was the first step in the Enchantress's plan. And she's up in a building looking out the window, looking on. And then the next phase is that Quicksilver goes to investigate some kind of an alert in the subway tunnel. And he sees that someone has sabotaged the train rails. But before he can do anything about it, Power Man steps in and knocks Quicksilver out and lays him on the tracks. So not only is there going to be a train disaster, but Quicksilver theoretically would get run over. And then the Avengers show up, and Wanda wonders how did they get there so soon. So clearly something's up there in terms of the Enchantress wanted them all to be there. So they run to rescue Quicksilver. And in order to do it, and this is a pretty darn good panel right here, Hawkeye has to fire an arrow, an explosive arrow that causes the train to derail and stop. Very dangerous. I guess they didn't have much time, though. He had to act quickly. And this is not an Avengers lineup with a strong person, right? There's no Wonder Man, there's no Thor, there's no Iron Man, there's no Vision. There's no member of the Avengers in this issue that has super strength other than whatever, you can however you can describe Cap. And by the way, in this era, Cap was still saying he didn't have any special powers. That is later, if you've seen the movies, right, that while Cap doesn't really have like superpowers like a suit of armor like Iron Man or a hammer like Thor or able to fly or anything like that, that Captain America has abilities based on the super soldier formula that made him from a little scrawny guy to a big, strong guy, right? And that kind of is his superpower. That plus all of his skills he's developed at throwing his shield and catching it, using it like a frisbee and like a weapon and all that. So Cap doesn't have like Spider-Man level strength or Iron Man level strength, or anything like that. But the super soldier serum took him from a zero to a hero, on the human level. So do you want to say Cap has no superpowers? Kind of. Do you want to say he does have superpowers compared to what he was before the super soldier formula? Well, yeah. So it's just one of those kind of in a gray area. It just depends on how you define it and what you mean by superpowers. Okay. So again, I love this shot here. I'm going to give I'll give Wally Wood a lot of credit here for the derailing of the train. So and then the colorist too. It's a really beautiful shot. But then the police show up, and you guessed it, all they know is the Avengers went down and derailed the train. And once again, Cap says, now look, you don't think we damaged that train just for kicks? Remember, it was a whim before. Now it's just for kicks. And meanwhile, in the shadows, Eric Josten says to Enchantress, that was quick thinking, gorgeous. If you hadn't made sure the train was empty, they'd never have wrecked it like you wanted them to. And so Power Man says, it's been all your show so far. I'm getting tired of waiting. Well, see, this is what I was talking about, is that they had Stan and Don Heck had this whole section of this story where it's not just it's not just Power Man beating up the Avengers. It's that the Enchantress puts them in a position where they are discredited and become, they don't have to get beaten up or killed or anything because they're getting run out of town. So I am kind of curious what Stan was thinking. I'd like to have sat down with him and said, all right, so if your plan was to have Power Man, Eric Josten, defeat the Avengers and the grim taste of victory or whatever, the bitter taste of defeat, then why did you have everything done by the Enchantress leading up to that? So we're still, I agree with Power Man here. I'm tired of waiting. It has been all her show so far. I want to see Power Man go up against the Avengers. That's what I'm waiting on now. Because again, they don't have a strong person. That's not what this team is. They don't have a single, there's no Colossus, no Thing, no Hulk, no Power Man. They are a guy with a shield, a guy with a bow and arrow, a guy that can run fast, and a lady that can do these little hex things. She gets obviously a lot more powerful later, but that's pretty much all Wanda could do back in 1965 was these little like, oh, you have bad luck suddenly things. And that's fine. That's interesting. All right. It's all part of a plot to discredit us, says Cap. All to make us appear to be dangerous to society. Okay. So what does Hawkeye say to that? Hooray for you. Any 6-year-old could have figured that out. And Cap says, I've had my fill of you. And Hawkeye says, and that goes double for me, mister. As our leader, you're a joke. Again, just a few issues ago, Hawkeye was begging to be on this team. Now he's calling Captain America a joke. Fire him, Steve. Just say, you know what, Hawkeye, maybe you should check out the Defenders. Maybe you should go join the New Warriors when they come along, or the Champions of Los Angeles. Go join the Champions. The Champions does end up basically becoming the leftovers, the rejects from the Avengers and the X-Men, right? It's Angel and Iceman along with Hercules and Black Widow, pretty much. So, Hawkeye, why don't you go become a champion? And occasionally, and Wanda looks at him and says, you are too cruel, Hawkeye. Captain America does not deserve such treatment from any of us. Thank you. And Clint's like, he's a big boy. He can speak for himself, but he thinks to himself, she's right, but I'll be hanged if I'll admit it. So at least Stan gives us a little acknowledgement that Hawkeye does understand he's crossing a line. But he doesn't do anything about it. All right. So here comes Eric Josten, finally getting the chance to do something. He smashes a car, beats up a postman. Oh, no, I guess it's because he's got like papers flying everywhere. It doesn't. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, these are crooks pretending to be like guards or postmen or something. And then the Enchantress has Captain America come and see Power Man beating up these guys. And so Captain America naturally assumes Power Man is a villain beating up good guys. So Cap jumps him. And of course, Eric Josten is thinking, it worked. The fool is attacking me. So they fight. We finally get a fight between these two. And Cap throws his shield, but Power Man dodges it. And then, another thing. Again, it continues to be the Enchantress show. Even though Power Man's doing the fighting here now, finally, the Enchantress is over in the bushes, putting enchantments on Cap to make him fight less efficiently. He missed his shield. He gets hit right in the face. Meanwhile, Power Man says, I wish that blonde doll would stop slowing him up. I'd like to prove I can beat him without any help. Yeah, Josten, you probably don't want to fight Captain America straight up, because he's, as with all the handicaps he's got against him right now, no shield and Hex is on him and everything, he's still giving you a run for your money before finally Power Man knocked him out. And these folks come up and say, those thieves disguised as uniformed guards, I was right, it was guards, would have stolen our vital papers if you hadn't stopped them. You're a hero, young man. But what made Captain America attack you? Is it true the Avengers have gone berserk? So it was all rigged so that Power Man would look like the hero and Cap is the villain. So I guess Cap somehow does get back home. They don't arrest him or anything. And Hawkeye just keeps twisting the knife on Cap. He says, hey, Winghead, are you sure the bad guys aren't paying you to give us Avengers a bad name? And then, you know what? The one thing that the one place Hawkeye has not gone yet, right? He insults, he belittles Captain America's abilities, his leadership. He even talks about him being old when it's only been like 18 years that he's been, that he was in the ice at this stage. And by the way, if you don't know what I mean by that, Cap was frozen in ice at the end of World War II. And, Marvel time rolls up behind itself. That's why Peter Parker's not, 65 years old now. he was in high school for 20 years. He was in college for 20 years, basically. So time rolls up. That's why Tony Stark was originally, in Vietnam. Now it was more like the Gulf War or something, or even more recently, war. Time rolls up behind itself. But one of the few anchors in Marvel's timeline that doesn't change is World War II and Cap's connection to it. So Nick Fury and Captain America both were in World War II. And every year, the amount of time that Cap was in the ice before the Avengers thawed him out gets longer, right? So in 1965, when this comic was published, Cap was in the ice for 18 years. Now, Cap was in the ice from 45 to like 2010 or something, right? So 55 years, 65 years. See, so it just gets longer and longer. But the one thing that Hawkeye has never done is attack and criticize what Captain America did in World War II. That's always been kind of off limits. Well, guess what? Hawkeye says to Cap, how'd we ever win the war with you on our side? Can you imagine anybody saying that to Captain America? I mean, I know that some of you might think, yeah, tell the old whatever, you tell him, straighten him out. You go, Hawkeye, tell him. I kind of understand that attitude coming from somebody maybe younger or more, rebellious, but this is freaking Captain America. How many times has he saved the world, even back then? From the Nazis, from the Red Skull, from Zemo, right? And you can tell me that this punk, this carny punk, is going to say, how'd we ever win the war with you on our side? Cap should have just jumped him right there and beaten the snot out of Hawkeye. Just beaten him raw, beat him down. And I would be there for it. If the whole rest of this issue were just Captain America just on Hawkeye, I would be there standing and cheering. How dare you? How'd we ever win the war with you on our side? How dare you? What's the matter with you, Hawkeye? You ought to be ashamed of yourself. So Cap says, shut up and listen, Hawkeye. And I approve of that. At least we know who the enemy is now. It's the one who calls himself Power Man. And Hawkeye, instead of saying, well, you're right, Cap, we need to look into that. Instead, what does Hawkeye say? And all this time, I thought it was Snow White. And Cap says, I'm warning you, fella, don't push me too far. Cap, he pushed you too far 3 issues ago. Just go off. Go off, Cap. The mayor is on the phone. I like that I'm assuming this is Wanda, because, of course, they'd make Wanda answer the phone rather than Pietro. And I don't think that Pietro would have called him Steve, right? But so Wanda's like, Steve, the mayor is on the phone. That's interesting that she called him Steve and not Cap or Captain America or whatever. He wants an explanation for your conduct yesterday. And Hawkeye says, watch what you say to him. The way your luck's been going, he's liable to run us out of town. Oh, my gosh. So the Enchantress and Power Man are watching the Avengers through the window of a rented mansion. Actually, they're watching the place that... this is the place Hawkeye is supposed to go. This is where Power Man is supposed to hang out. And Hawkeye says, how can a nobody like him afford a shack like this? He breaks in the door. And at least he does. Hawkeye thinks to himself, even though I'm always riding Winghead, I'd still like to know how Power Man beat him yesterday. I wouldn't tackle Cap myself unless my assurance was all paid up. Yeah, well, you got that right. Don't worry about it, Hawkeye. I can see you. Those arrows won't help you against me, so I'll just relieve you of them. And Power Man steals his arrows and crushes them. Wow. So Hawkeye is down to one arrow before he's really even done a bit of a fight, had one panel of battling in this issue. So they're squaring off. Meanwhile, Wanda and Pietro have somehow gone to see Carol Channing in Dolly. And so Quicksilver is saying, can't let Cap's defeat go unavenged. I've got to visit Power Man. So they're talking about this musical that they've seen, but they're both really wanting to investigate Power Man. So they make excuses to each other, and then Wanda's going to go, and so is Pietro going to investigate. So Hawkeye and Power Man are squaring off. And Hawkeye says, "How did you know those uniformed men were really crooks unless you were part of the plot yourself?" And Power Man says, "I congratulate you, Hawkeye. That's a very good question. That was a good job by Hawkeye to actually show some brains for once. I ride on Hawkeye when he rides on Cap, but I'll give him credit when he says something smart, and he just did." So they fight, and Power Man is beating up Hawkeye. He beats up Quicksilver through various means. And Wanda's out there looking, and "Stop where you are, miss. We want to talk to you." And "We're from the police, ma'am. We were called by Power Man that there were trespassers on his property." So once again, Enchantress says they'll never live down the disgrace. So the mayor and the city council, who are all, of course, white dudes with cigars and stuff back then, they decide that it's unanimously agreed the Avengers are a public menace, and a court order is issued forcing them to disband. They can't defy legal court order. How far from Civil War this is, right? When the government tries to order the Avengers around, and this would only lead us eventually to Henry Peter Gyrick, of course. There's a lot of stuff that comes out of these early issues of Avengers. They lay the siege for later stories, like Gyrick will step in as a national security agency guy who wants to limit the Avengers and limit their travels and their security codes and everything. And then so Quicksilver says, and then of course Civil War, the whole federal government tries to register superheroes, and you all know that story, I'm sure, pretty well. And Captain America is now believing what Hawkeye has been saying. Here Hawkeye says, in sort of the next to last thing, "Not bad, Rogers. It didn't take you long to lead the Avengers to complete disaster." And he says, "Maybe I deserve it. When I took command of the Avengers, they were at the height of their power, their prestige, their fame, and now look what I've done." And Hawkeye can't even leave that alone. He says, "Still trying to hog all the credit, huh? Well, it won't work. We're all to blame." So even when Hawkeye tries to say, "It's not all your fault, Cap," he can't just say, "It's not all your fault." He has to say, "You're trying to hog all the credit." Truly a miserable and wretched human being is Hawkeye in 1965. No man enjoys the taste of defeat, but to the proud it can be doubly painful. Next issue, you will see what happens to the mighty who have fallen. We promise you a tale that you will never forget. All right, so let's move on to the letters page. Didn't seem to offer anything of note this time, though I always check. So let's move on to Avengers 22 quickly. The last one was the bitter taste of defeat, or something along that nature. This one with a really cool cover, I think an even better cover than last time, The Road Back. Now, if you didn't know the context of this issue, and I remember, a while back looking at the Avengers cover gallery for the millionth time, and I didn't remember the context, and so I remember seeing that picture and that title and thinking, Avengers 22, The Road Back, and it shows Captain America getting assaulted by Power Man and the Enchantress. And I remember thinking, how is that the road back? I don't understand. And of course, it is. The first issue broke the Avengers down. This one brings them back. All right. So see Captain America's sensational battle with Power Man. Also, a surprise team of villains whom you never expected to see in this ish. All right, let's see. And that's a great shot of the Enchantress right there. I mean, Power Man looks appropriately hulking. Cap looks dazed and confused. We get some heads of Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch in purple again, and Quicksilver. But it's a great pose and shot of Amora, the Enchantress. All right, so let's look at issue 22, The Road Back. Having been framed by Power Man and the Enchantress, the angry Avengers are under orders to disband after being declared public menaces by the city council. So they just don't think that Power Man could have done it by himself. They got to find out who was behind it. And Hawkeye says it's too late for any pep talks, Rogers. The party's over. By the way, the same people responsible for this issue as last. So Cap makes a good point. He says, Hawkeye, after all your big talk, are you going to give up as easy as that? And Hawkeye says, you're not impressing anyone with that hero type speech. We're licked and you know it. At least let us say goodbye as friends, says Wanda. No, there is nothing more to be said. Why prolong this unhappy moment, says Quicksilver. I was mentioning before that Quicksilver wears green, kind of his classic green outfit with the light green gloves and underwear showing, and the lightning bolt for a belt and across his chest. I kind of always preferred the light bluish Quicksilver. And I always wondered, because, you know, when the coloring on comics looked like they do here, was them putting him in that light blue, kind of powder puff blue version of this outfit, was that supposed to look silver? I mean, I guess not, because he would look more like the Silver Surfer. The Silver Surfer didn't have powder blue, but I always figured, why isn't Quicksilver in like a silver costume? Wouldn't that look cool? I don't know. Cap calls him a bunch of quitters. Wanda says only a fool fights on after the battle's been lost. You should be able to accept defeat gracefully. And he says, how did you ever become an Avenger? Basically with that attitude, which ticks off Quicksilver. And they fight. La 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 la. Hawkeye gets involved. And Quicksilver and Wanda leave. Cap tries to thank Hawkeye for standing up for him there. And Hawkeye basically says, don't mention it. I'd have done this much for a stranger. Well, don't get your shield rusty. Don't let your shield get rusty. So they're gone. Cap stands there not knowing what to do. Once before, I had known the bitter taste of failure when I lost my partner, Bucky, and now this. Losing a battle is one thing, but to break up a team, he feels really bad about it. And so he goes out wandering around. Meanwhile, this is actually kind of amusing. It's uncomfortable, but it's amusing. The other three Avengers are trying to get jobs. Hawkeye tries to get on Ed Sullivan's show, but he's a public menace, so he can't. Quicksilver tries to get a job at a carnival, but the other performers would quit. Wanda's trying to get into show business. Why should I hire a gal with a hex power? And she says, but I can sing. And he says, so can the canary. Goodbye. And I'm like, I didn't know Wanda could sing. I mean, I guess it makes sense that she could, but interesting. So they're getting told, no. And they don't know what to do to make a living. And they end up getting recruited by the ringmaster and the Carnival of Crime. I guess at this point, nobody knew about the ringmaster and the Carnival of Crime except people who read Spider-Man number 22. So the ringmaster is so excited with his evil plot, he can't wait till morning to do it. And so he gets them all together, and he reveals to Wanda and Pietro that they're going to be robbing stuff. And of course, credit to Quicksilver that they've left the villainous life of Magneto and his crew, and they object to that. So the ringmaster tries to hypnotize Pietro, and we get a battle between the Circus of Crime and Wanda and Pietro. And I have to say, it's really cool that we do get a kind of like a solo Wanda and Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver story here, at least for a few pages. And then Hawkeye, of course, is there. He gets involved as well. And they fight. That's kind of like when I don't have anything particular to say about a battle, I just kind of say, and they fight, and they fight. And then, oh, it's the Enchantress's old plan again. The ringmaster brings in the cops and says the Avengers attacked us. They're trying to rob my circus. So they escape. And now there's a statewide manhunt for the Avengers, and people are fighting over it. And they're worried. The original Avengers are too busy. Oh, here we go again. So let's see. There were 4 Avengers that resigned. So here's what Iron Man is doing. Here's what Thor is doing. And here's what Giant Man is doing. By the way, they admit they don't know what Giant Man is doing, says Stan. I thought there were 4. It's like there's an Avenger missing. It's like there's an Avenger that kind of gets short shrift early on. I wonder who that could be. I wonder why that would be. All right. So I love that Power Man calls the Enchantress baby. That's just the best, right? Oh, nobody calls the Enchantress baby, not even Power Man. So, and she says, she thinks to herself, does he really think I could ever care for a mortal? And yet there is something about him, the way he carries himself, his pride. Yeah, but you love Thor. And of course, though nothing ever is really much going to come of that up until probably the late 90s, you don't need to be falling for Eric Josten. All right. So they go and meet with, I was trying to find his name, but he's a press agent that's going to try to make them look good. Since the Avengers broke up, oh, yeah. Oh, yank. Dang, y'all. So the Enchantress and Power Man are talking to a press agent. Now, follow my line of thinking here. He says, I could make you two the biggest front page item since the Beatles. And item means like romantic, and I'm sure Amora's not enthralled with that, but Eric probably is. And Josten says, what are you, some kind of nut? What do we need publicity for? And the Enchantress says, just what exactly is your plan? So she's interested in hearing him out. And the PR guy says, listen closely. Since the Avengers broke up, someone's got to take their place. You two have become public heroes. People trust you, admire you. See what I'm getting at now? And the Enchantress says, you mean that we might form a new team of Avengers? I never thought of that. He says, naturally you didn't. That's where I come in. So is this where the seeds first were sown that would eventually give us Kurt Busiek and I'm blanking out on the artist that was the ultimate Spider-Man artist for so long, Mark Bagley. Was this where Kurt and Bagley came up with the idea of the Thunderbolts? Not only is it like the same idea, the Avengers have broken up, let's get these villains and have them get together and pretend to be a new team. It even has one of the characters who ends up on the Thunderbolts, Eric Josten, though, as Atlas. So I have to feel like this had at least some influence. In fact, can't you just see a young Kurt Busiek? I have to ask Kurt about this. I will. I'm going to ask Kurt about this. But can't you just see a young Kurt Busiek reading this issue and saying, as this page happens, saying, oh, the Masters of Evil are going to form a new Avengers team. How awesome would that be? And then, of course, it doesn't happen. And he had to have been disappointed. I am too. I totally wish that they'd put together a dark Avengers, an evil Avengers team back in 1965. How cool would that have been? So let's see. It would have been Power Man, the Enchantress. She would have been like the Green Witch or the Emerald Witch or something, right? Surely he can be Atlas. Bring in the Executioner. Just call him Scourge or something. Don't go by the Executioner. That's not a good name. It's a great name for a villain, not a good name for a hero. And then you bring in, who else was available? The Melter. I don't know if Radioactive Man was around yet. the Black Knight. Well, we know that Black Knight is later a good guy. It's a different Black Knight, but so you could make him like the Knight, the Chevalier, you know, something like that. I'm just saying you could have done a really cool Thunderbolts back in 1965. So they squabble, and it turns out I'd forgotten this because I reread this for the first time in ages a couple of days ago, and then I didn't get a chance to record this show. So I'd forgotten that the press agent is actually Captain America with a great costume. I wish he could have left his mask on though, because I love that like the mustachioed cigar smoking bald guy turns out to be Captain America. I would have liked to have seen that kind of a Captain America. And they recorded on audio the plans being admitted by Power Man. All right, and they fight, right? And they fight. Cap gets some shots in there, but the Enchantress starts to try to interfere again. They end up on the stairway, and Cap rips up the carpet, makes him fall. Power Man comes smashing through the wall, gets hit by the shield, and they fight. And they fight. Cap kind of gets knocked out. Power Man's carrying his body, and he says, "Where'd the Enchantress go? Hey, gorgeous, come see what I've got for you." What? She's on the floor. What happened? Get up, say something. And Hawkeye steps in. We put her to sleep for a while. I've got another sleepy time era right here for you. So Power Man throws Captain America. Oh no, Clint, you got hit by Glamour Pants. And then Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch get involved. And they fight, and they fight, and they fight. This kind of goes on for a while. This is when you had to have the requisite multi-page battle, scene. So they fight. Captain America recovers. He's back in the fight. And I love it. At this point, the Enchantress is just like, screw this. She's got no loyalty whatsoever. She says, "I fear I backed the wrong man. I thought you would be different, but you lacked the true killer instinct." "Wait, what do you mean?" "I mean farewell," says Amora. "And unlike you mortals, I have my own way of departing." And she teleports or spells, enchants herself out of there, leaving Eric Josten all alone with the Avengers. And he admits, "I did it all for you." That sounds like an 80s power ballad. "I did it all for the Enchantress. You were all that mattered." So while Simon Williams was turned into Wonder Man and then just couldn't be a villain, and that kind of what brought him down, because he changed sides and helped the Avengers before he was put into put into a coma or something. Power Man did it all out of his attraction to the Enchantress. And when she leaves, she says, "Perhaps it is best this way. No man may love an immortal." Meanwhile, Thor is still dating Jane Foster. I digress. So quickly, "This is our chance," says Wanda. But Power Man says, "Relax, lady. The fight's over. Without her, what have I got to fight for?" And so Cap says he means it. I don't know how he knows that. "Power Man will trouble us no longer." And that gets us to the last page, where, as usual, they cram in 9 panels. I just don't understand the pacing of comics in the 1960s, but okay. So Cap wants to know how the others came to be there. They followed the portable transceiver that apparently got activated when Cap scooped up the audio tape with his shield. It tripped a circuit, causing the signal. Okay, so Cap didn't call for help. It just kind of miraculously happened that help was called. And then Cap says, "This audio equipment I had recorded them talking, admitting that it was a frame up. The Avengers take it to the police. The police take it to the city council. They'll have a heap of apologizing to do to you Avengers, says the cop, especially since the DA wormed the truth about the ringmaster out of Princess Python. So Princess Python, the weak link in the circus of crime, she gave up the goods. What about Power Man, Sarge? Since there are no official charges against him, he's free to go. So after 2 issues of Power Man doing all this stuff that they admitted to, they just let him walk out the door. Just let him go. It's all good. Yeah. You and the Enchantress basically destroyed. I mean, when we thought the Avengers were doing all this destruction, we were all over them. Well, now we know it wasn't the Avengers, so they're okay. And instead, with you, you're good. Just carry on. Carry on about your business, Power Man. We won't bother you a bit. But one thing that does come out of this is the city council meets, and they agree to declare this Sunday as Avengers Day. We'll return their special priority cards and give them the key to the city. It's the least we can do for them, especially since the ceremony will be one of our greatest tourist attractions, even top the World's Fair. Now, this is another thing I think Kurt must have read and taken to heart, because in the first year of Volume 3 of the Avengers that he wrote, they do celebrate Avengers Day. So both the Thunderbolts and Avengers Day may very well come out of Avengers number 22. And I like the idea that that could be the case. And then Stan says, and as that other great writer, Will Shakespeare once said, all's well that ends well, or is it? Looks like you saved the day, Steve, so we'll let bygones be bygones, says Quicksilver. Guess again, Avenger, says Cap. I've played straight man to you jokers long enough. You can get yourself another clown. Now that our names are cleared, I'm kissing you off. And Hawkeye says, I'll be a monkey's uncle. Well, he means it. So as we close out the 2-part Power Man saga, Stan in the final next issue box says, does Cap really mean it? Is this another crucial split up for the Mighty Avengers? Do we have all kinds of dazzling surprises waiting for you next ish? Why not tune in and see for yourselves? So they don't know yet what's going to happen in the next issue. They haven't really figured out yet what will happen in Avengers number 23, but they do know that part of it will be precipitated by Captain America quitting, which is funny because there's 4 of them, and Captain America is quitting the Fantastic Four Avengers. Like every other issue back in this period, somebody was quitting the Fantastic Four. I'm quitting the Fantastic Four. You can't quit the Fantastic Four. Why not? Because I'm quitting the Fantastic Four. That was happening like every other issue all the way up through the 70s. So Captain America leaves the Avengers. It's weird to think of the Avengers as being Quicksilver, Hawkeye, and the Scarlet Witch. There's a strange trio. All right, let's see if there's anything else of note. We have a bullpen bulletins page there. Here's a whole caboodle. That's what I call my daughter sometimes. That's so funny. Of news and gossip straight from your bullpen to you. So just some various news. I think they just kind of pulled this out of the letters page finally. And then we get your standard letters page, but I'll note that they do know a little bit more, I think, here. It says, next ish, a new career seems to beckon as Captain America decides to go it alone. Also, you'll see the amazing return of an old-time arch villain as our plot grows more and more startling with each page. So come a-running when you hear the cry Avengers Assemble. We promise that you'll be in good company. Till then, face front Irving Forbush may be watching. All right, there you go. So Avengers number 21 and 22, the grim, bitter taste of defeat. I keep getting the name wrong. And the road back. Join me in our next episode. We will look at Avengers 23 for sure. I'm going to say I think we get Kang. You know, spoilers for late 1965. I think we get Kang back. and I'm pretty excited. And we'll also have some new guests coming on board to discuss these issues with me. All right. I hope everybody enjoys it. Avengers Assemble, and we will see you guys in the next video. Remember, go to www.avengersassemble.net and join up to become a patron and part of the show. We'll see you then.